So yeah, my name is Arlémi. I work at Postman. I'm going to have 3 slides just to put everyone on the same page. Then it's all going to be a live demo. So it's going to be interesting internet permitting, right? Quick question before we get started. Who knows what Postman is? Okay. Who doesn't know what Postman is then? Okay, cool. So Postman API tool. And when I say API tool, there's a reason, because it went through a few phases. It started as a Chrome extension, just on a Stack Overflow post. That's how it kind of got started, like 10 years ago. Moved it to an API client. Then people wanted to collaborate, so we created the API collaboration platform right there, where you could have a team collaborate on these collections of requests, etc. And eventually, we had with the 10 last year, we released the API platform, which kind of caters to everything from API producer to API consumer and every step of the API lifecycle. I have about 10 minutes, so I'm not going to go through every single step. I'm just going to go and kind of do a day in the life of in my demo. So I'm going to start from an open API file, and from there we'll see different things you can do in Postman. Hopefully everyone here is going to learn something. I say hopefully, but also in the case if you don't learn anything, it means we are doing a good job of like communicating what we can do with Postman. So let's see. I'll jump in the demo, and maybe I'll have a couple of questions at the end to see who's followed. Cool. So you can, when you create a new workspace, you have the option to start from scratch, or you can get a workspace that already has some stuff about how do I do X, Y, Z in Postman. So it's going to be Nordic API demo. And we have different types of workspaces, whether you want to work on your own or with a team. So this one is a team workspace, so I could invite people to collaborate. At the moment, I'm the only one in this team, so it's not relevant. You can see it's already pre-populated with a bunch of collections that are documented. How do you do contract testing in Postman, etc. So it's a good way to get started. If you can't sit in a room with me to talk about these things, you can create one of these templates and see these different features. In my case, I'm going to go and import a file. So I'll go to my downloads. And this is an open API of an insurance API. So you can see it imported a collection, which I can find right here. It's got 2 endpoints, create or register an insurance claim, and get a claim by ID. It doesn't work from scratch. If I send this, getting a could not send request, it doesn't work. One of the first things you can do is mock that collection. So I'm going to go ahead and say mock collection, and this is going to be called mock insurance. And I'm going to leave as default. I could save the variable as an environment, etc. I'm just going to go from scratch. And now I have that URL. And if I replace the variable, so here you can see I have a base URL variable. I replace that here and say, now call that endpoint. What the mock is going to do is going to use all of the example responses that I have saved and do some pattern matching. And now I have a working server that I can get. So it's using the examples from the open API as well in the response. So you could give that to your front-end team. They can start integrating with it. Whenever the backend team is done, they can just flip the URL, move to the production one or stage one, etc. And it should be easy to do parallel development. One of the things, not quite automated testing quite yet, but now we have something against which we can test. So what I want to do now, and if you're not familiar with it, we have this test tab where you can write tests, and these tests are using chai.js, which is a JavaScript library. And you have some snippets here. It's a bit small. To test the status code is 200, etc. You could click on them. Another thing we've added now, so if I go at the collection level here at the top left, I have Postbot at the bottom, and Postbot is our new generative AI to which I can ask questions when it loads, again, depending on internet permitting. So I'll just tell it to generate tests. And what it's going to do, so it's looking at how the requests are constructed, what's part of the headers, etc. But it's also looking at the response. So it's going to send the request, inspect the response, and try to write tests against this. So you can see for the second one, checking the response status code, the required field, non-empty strings, etc. And I can see that there's one test that fails already, so the timestamp is not in a valid format. So this one, apparently I'm using a non-valid date format, so I'm just going to remove that test. I don't want that as part of my collection. And hopefully it's going to do the first ones too. Okay, cool again. And it's wrote a test about the response time is less than 500 milliseconds. I want to keep this. This is a test that eventually my API should pass. I'm going to keep this one and save these tests. So that's the first step. I'm still unit testing. I have these two endpoints with now tests written in it. And if I wanted to, like for example, this one returns schema, right? So it's going to be an object, JSON object with insurance ID, timestamp description. And I'm not actually validating that schema. I don't have a test for this. So what I can do, I can go for postbot here and say, validate the schema of the response. And now it's going to add a specific test just for that specific thing. So it's going to send a request, look at what the response looks like, and apparently fail. Because it's what you do in live demos. I'm just going to move that here. That should be better. So now I have a test. And you can see it's defining a schema with my insurance ID, timestamp description. And it's checking that it is valid. So it is valid. If I had a different response, it would fail. Cool. I'm happy with my tests. You can imagine that you would have a collection with a lot more requests. Obviously, I'm keeping it short for the demo. Now I want to run it as a whole, right? I don't want to have to go in each and single one of these requests and send them one by one. So I'll go at the collection level again. And you have this little menu called Run Collection, and I have different options. One of them is run it manually. So if I click that, it's going to send my 2 requests, give me the results. I can schedule it here. So this one, maybe I want to check every morning at 7 a.m., run my tests, see if the service is up, right? It's more of a like monitoring that everything works fine. And then we have the automate run. So just show you the manual run. If I run this, same again, imagine you have tons of endpoints. Don't have to go to each one by one, and you can see the different results. And now I can actually see the 500 millisecond test passed. But let's move back to run and talk about the CLI. So we have the Postman CLI, and that's kind of when we're moving into automation. You want to put that in your CI/CD, for example. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to generate an API key. It's going to be called demo. Insert it, and now I have that command that's using the Postman CLI, and I'll put that in my terminal, pasted. So what happens here? It's using the Postman login feature. So I'm going to be in the logged in state with my Postman account. It's going to pull the latest version of the collection, so you're sure that you're always running the latest version. You're not exporting the collection, ensuring that, sending a Slack message to your colleague and saying, is this the right collection? Do I have the right version? No, you're always pulling the latest version. And it's just running the test. So you can see some of them failed, and they actually all failed because what I didn't do was replacing the variable as the initial value. Another point here, actually, for those of you who don't know, it's a question that I've had a couple of times today at the booth. Anything you put in current value is never synced to our servers. Anything you put in initial is always synced. So that's why it didn't work here. Now if I run it again, it's going to pull the right variable, and it's going to run fine. Okay, just the 500 millisecond didn't work. It's a bit zoomed in. There you go. I've got all of my tests running, etc. So now you can imagine having that in your CI/CDs, for example. If I go back to my runner, here you've got run on CI/CD. It's a bit hidden at the bottom right. But let's say I'm using GitLab. I can go in GitLab. It's going to generate the GitLab job for me. If I use GitHub, I can say I'm using GitHub Actions. Same again, it's going to generate the code. So put that in your CI/CD, and it's going to run whenever you deploy. If there's a fail, you can stop the deployment. One thing I do want to mention, because not everyone knows as well, we have a VS Code extension. So you could have your devs that are using VS Code on the side. They're logged in, and they can see, let me just make sure I'm on the same account. And I can use the same API request and send them in VS Code if that's their tool of choice. So I can switch to my Nordic API demo, and you will see the same thing as you would, but just in VS Code. Okay, quick question before I wrap up. Who's learned something? Okay, so see, mixed feelings, because everyone's learned something, which means we're not doing a good job at letting you know through the tool what we're doing. But also, it means I still have a job for the foreseeable future, because I can still go around and talk about these things. Cool, so I think that's all for me. I'll give it to the next one. Thank you all for listening to my talk.